Something slightly different today. While I did receive this review copy for free, it wasn't from the publisher. I want to give a shout out to my good friend Saki Sakura for the help this time. I appreciate getting the opportunity to review this game. As always, I believe transparency is very important, so yes, ultimately I did still get this game for free, but I'll always remain completely honest in my reviews. With that said, let's move on. While there have been a few music games with a focus on versus play, like Guitar Man for example, I don't think the concept has been taken nearly as far as God of Rock has gone with it. A music rhythm game infused with fighting game elements to create a really chaotic but surprisingly fun versus match that's unlike anything else out there. I applaud the creativity and the foundation is there for something really good, but there are several missing features that I wish were present, as well as other aspects that I don't necessarily agree with. As good as the game is, there are too many things that keep it from being great, but it still is an interesting game to keep an eye out for. As a fighting game, the story isn't too important, but it is there and it's pretty fun. The titular God of Rock contacts several artists from different walks of life to participate in his musical combat tournament, with the winner having their wish granted. It's very lighthearted and pretty funny. Unfortunately, it's also very bare bones. You get an opening cutscene to explain the character's backstory, and then a single brief image for the ending, and that's it. The dialogue is fun, and I do like the voice acting, but there's just so little of it. There's also a description on the store page which just mystifies me. Follow your favorite character through a branching story mode. That definitely doesn't happen, at least not at launch. It's just a traditional linear arcade mode with a one-way trip to the ending. For the rest of the presentation, the game looks and sounds good. Graphically speaking, the game isn't anything amazing, but I do like the character designs. They all have these inexplicable cyborg parts, and it just looks cool. There are also some obvious references to real-life rock stars, like Freddie Mercury, Elvis Presley, and a David Bowie character from outer space named Ziggy. It might be a little on the nose, but I'd say they did it well. I like it. The music is arguably the most important thing for this kind of game. Let's be real, as far as original soundtracks for music-based games go, you're gonna have a hard time topping Danny Baranowski's masterful album for Crypt of the Necrodancer. But God of Rock makes a solid attempt. There's good variety in terms of mood, style, and tempo, and all of it is just cool to listen to on its own. Even if you don't have any interest in playing it for yourself, I recommend checking out the soundtrack. They uploaded it online for free and it's really good. As you can see with the gameplay, you and your opponent follow a track of button prompts to the beat of the music. However, unlike most multiplayer music games, you can also directly attack your opponent with special input commands, which sends a flurry of additional notes for them to keep up with. The commands and the attacks themselves are different for every character, and they kind of adhere to common fighting game moves like quarter circles, half circles, and Z motion inputs, but there's very little rhyme or reason to how these motions are chosen. For example, Edith's Ultra command is 2 half circles going clockwise and beginning from the up position. I get that there's no jumping in this game, but some of these commands are so weird and unintuitive that it feels like they were made to be awkward to input on purpose. Which I can see that actually being what they were going for here, as much of the game is based around constant multitasking. And considering how each character has such different rules behind how their mechanics work, it's a challenge in and of itself to keep up with everything that's going on around the music track. Something that's less excusable though, is having to go through hoops just to see each character's move list. You have to enter training mode or start a match first just to gain access. This might be common in most fighting games, but for something as simple as this, I don't see why each character's move list can't be shown right on the character select screen, similar to how Fantasy Strike does it. And again, a lot of these commands are awkward and unintuitive, so a quick refresher before a match starts would be very welcome. There's a lot going on in these battles, so I'll try my best to break everything down succinctly. Above the track are the cooldown bars for each character's special moves, all of which automatically refill on their own. And below is the Ultra meter to execute EX and Ultra moves. That meter fills up based on performance and sometimes other effects depending on your character. One of the elements that's pretty integral to God of Rock is the reversal system. An opponent's special command can be cancelled out with a higher level attack of your own, with level 2 beating level 1, an EX move beats a level 3, and an Ultra move beats everything, and it can't be cancelled out. Just like with fighting games, the higher level play of God of Rock will likely come down to reacting and reading when your opponent is preparing their offense and appropriately countering them with proper timing. When both players are hitting the beats of the music, it only deals damage if one player has a better accuracy rating than the other. And if no one hits a particular beat, then nothing happens. So the challenge lies in trying to keep up with the music on top of inputting these special commands at the same time and performing reversals whenever possible. It's a multitasking nightmare. But, like I already said, there's not much of a penalty if both players are unable to keep up during a particular segment, so it just comes down to who does a better job overall. There's no time limit either, at least not as far as I could tell. A match goes on indefinitely until one player finally succumbs, and in order to expedite this, the song's track gets more and more complex over time. This can lead to some intense scrambles between strong players, as both of them struggle to survive for as long as they can. Going back to the characters, all of them have their own distinct move lists and abilities. Some are straightforward, like Hilda. All she does is build up healing stacks, and then spends them on either her EX or Ultra move to heal herself and dish out additional damage. Since she doesn't do too much to actually affect the opponent, I get the feeling that she's a lower tier character. Champ, on the other hand, is ridiculous. This guy can steal meter from the opponent, and his Ultra move has the game play automatically for a short time. Edith is arguably even more broken. She can prevent the opponent from hitting perfect beats for a while, she can steal their health, and she can invert their controls. And considering how fast this game moves, suddenly getting inverted controls can easily be a death sentence. I won't go into detail on everyone, but I'd also like to mention that characters like Rosetta and Kokasu play very differently from the others too. There's a good bit of variety here, and you're bound to find a playstyle that you'll enjoy, but wow, it seems really unbalanced and all over the place. Granted, the game is brand new, so any discussions on balance is definitely premature. And besides, I'm clearly not very good at the game, so I shouldn't have much an opinion on the balancing aspect anyway. But I do find the combat to be creative and a ton of fun. However, I do have a lot of issues here, starting with the layout and orientation. In most fighting games, it's typical for character health to be displayed on the top, the game's action in the middle, and resources along the bottom. This allows your eyes to stay focused on the center of the screen, and a quick glance up and down will tell you everything else you need to know. With God of Rock, the track acts as the game's action. This area that takes up half the screen in the middle is just for show. While each player's meters surround the track just fine, Their health is shoved all the way on the top of the screen. You have to dart your eyes pretty far to get some crucial information. You have no reasonable way of knowing how far along you are to winning a match or how poorly you're doing in comparison to your opponent, which can leave a match ending rather suddenly and in confusion until you realize who won. Hell, it's hard to tell by how much you won since the health bars disappear quickly after a knockout is landed. The layout is simply too spread out, and I'm not a fan of the orientation either. It might sound weird and picky, but man, there's something really off about switching between the player 1 or the player 2 side for me in this game. The notes coming in from the other side is surprisingly awkward for some reason, and it certainly doesn't help that all of your special commands are reversed too. I would much prefer a vertical layout, which I'm sure most would agree is more traditional and common. More importantly, it would allow for much more intuitive use of fight sticks, with the 4 buttons being laid out across. As for the other elements, each player's health bar can be placed alongside their respective track vertically. The reversal indicator remains in the center, and the meters can be put along the bottom of the screen. This keeps each player's focus within a very centralized area where all the necessary information can be gleaned quickly, including both players' health and resources. And since both tracks are scrolling in the exact same way, it's a lot more natural to jump between the player 1 and player 2 sides. I also understand wanting to reverse the special commands for player 2, just like in a traditional fighting game, but it seems like a needless complexity in this case. There should be more of an emphasis on fighting your opponent and less on fighting the game mechanics. I feel like there can and should be a stronger effort to make this game more natural to play. While I think I've made my argument clear, I can understand how others might have their reasons for disagreement there, and that's fine. Going forward though, these issues are just inexcusable. For the launch of the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 versions of the game, the controls cannot be remapped. This is an extremely basic feature that should be available at launch. It would also be nice to do things like changing the symbols to arrow keys or just generic circles, as well as customizing the colors for each track, maybe to better match the colors of the buttons on a PlayStation controller. But what I cannot accept is the inability to remap the controls. Sure, you can remap the controls on the console level, but that shouldn't be necessary, and it's not a good workaround for offline versus. From what I understand, this is already possible on PC, and a future update is planned for consoles, but over a week since its official launch and nothing yet for such a basic feature is simply not excusable. The general lack of content is also worth noting. Offline versus works, and there's about 12 characters and 40 songs, so that's a pretty good amount of stuff to work with. There's a basic tutorial, nothing special, and the training mode has good settings to adjust, but there's just not much in the way of single player stuff. The arcade mode is fine, but things like a survival mode and maybe special challenges against unique AI opponents would have helped stretch out the value. I also want to point out again that the alleged story mode with branching paths just doesn't exist. The track editor does deserve special mention. You can customize any song you want with your own notes, which is awesome for the more creative types. But I still feel like there needs to be more actual gameplay content. Of course, online play is crucial, and God of Rock does deliver, but only halfway. Ranked matchmaking is simple and works. Search for a match, and off you go. Hell, I wish Guilty Gear Strive worked out that well instead of this terrible lobby system. Unfortunately, you're not allowed to do anything else while you wait for a match. No training, no arcade mode, nothing. Just sit there and wait patiently. Come on, the fight request feature has been a thing since Street Fighter IV back in 2009. I did get quite a few online matches on launch day, and it worked out pretty well. The netcode is good, and I didn't experience any major hiccups, but since that initial launch day, the population seems to have dwindled pretty badly. Of course, I don't blame the developer and publisher for this, it kind of is what it is, but what's really bad is a lack of private lobbies, proper invitations, and, if you can believe it, no spectating. While there is crossplay and it seems to work out well, you can't invite players outside of your platform. For example, Guilty Gear Strive gets around the crossplay stuff by creating private lobbies that anyone can join as long as they know the private code. It allows for easy access regardless of platform for both players and spectators. That last bit is important. Without a spectator option, you can't really run online tournaments. At least not live as it happens, which is kind of the whole point. So a huge market is missed right there. It's such a shame because there is a lot of good here. This is a really cool and creative game with a ton of potential that works well for the most part. But there are way too many inexcusable misgivings. The heads-up display layout and orientation aren't great in my opinion, but you can make it work if you're dedicated. The lack of single-player content is unfortunate, but the versus aspect works, the online netcode is fine, and there are plenty of characters and songs to keep things interesting for a while. The major blows lie in the really important missing features. Not being able to remap the controls and a lack of properly implemented private lobbies with no spectating are baffling that they're missing at launch. And it severely hinders the reach that this game could have. The lack of single-player content hurts the casual audience, and the missing competitive features hurt the hardcore audience, leaving a game that's bound to disappoint everyone on some level. I want to be clear, this game is not bad at all. Even if I'm not good at it and I wouldn't say the game is really for me, I do like what they've made here and I want to see this game succeed, but I think it was released too early. I would highly recommend waiting for some more features to be added down the line, but if what you've heard sounds good to you and you're looking for a new music game to play, then yeah, this one's really not that bad. It's just really lacking in its current state, and I hope that this is remedied very soon. Thanks for watching my review on God of Rock.